This is a story following a Nord's life, story made by Cookie Monster. Please enjoy.
My name is Haldor. I fought in the Great War against the Aldmeri Dominion, and I was there when the Thalmor invaded the Imperial City. The streets were chaos, our formations had broken, and each man fought his own battle. I cut down one enemy after another, young soldiers like me all following orders. Then, in a heartbeat, it was over. A blade struck me from behind, and I fell, blood pooling around me. As I faded, I thought only of regret for the life I hadn't lived. But then Marla, an apothecary, found me. She had been moving through the battlefield, tending to both Imperial and Thalmor soldiers alike. A kind-hearted woman, she valued all life and mourned the countless souls lost to the war. She cared for me while I was recovering, tending to my wounds with the gentleness I didn't deserve. As I healed, we grew close, and over time, we fell in love. By the time I could walk again, the war was over. We had lost, but that didn't matter to me anymore. Marla had become my world. Together, we left the Imperial City and moved to Skyrim, back to my old village, and started a new life together. I thought we had left all the bloodshed behind. But then war broke out in Skyrim. A civil war, they called it. A war between the Stormcloaks and the Imperials. But I never cared much for neither side nor their ideology. To me, it was all just noises. My farm in the hills near Falkreath was all that mattered. I was too busy growing crops, feeding my family, and making sure we had enough to survive the next winter. I didn't have the time or the energy for politics. The world had a way of making sure you stayed busy with your own struggles, and that was already enough for me. I had 2 kids, little Derek and Lila. They and Marla were the only thing I needed to worry about. Sure, my hands were rough from work, and my back ached every day, but I couldn't have asked for a better life. Even thought the world around us was changing with war spreading across Skyrim. None of it ever touched us. Not until it did. The day the war came to our doorstep was the day everything changed. Soldiers had been marching through the countryside for weeks, and the tension in the air grew thicker with every passing day. It wasn't long before the battle came to us. I remember the sounds of shouting, the clash of steel, and the distant thud of catapults firing. It was chaos, and we all huddled inside, hoping we wouldn't get caught in it. Marla, Derek, Lila, and I stayed low, trying to keep our heads down as the battle raged on in the distance. The walls of the house shook with every explosion, and the air was thick with the smell of smoke. But then, the unthinkable happened. We heard a crash, a loud bang that shook the entire house. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and I rushed to the window, peering outside. A group of soldiers had been fighting on the other side of the fields, and somehow one of the catapults, fired by who knows which side, had overshot its target. The massive stone, engulfed in flames, crashed at the edge of our farm, right beside the crops. I watched as the explosions set the crops ablaze, the flames quickly spreading. I cursed under my breath. The last thing I needed was for the crops to be ruined. It was already late autumn, the final days of the season, and we wouldn't have time to plant anything else before winter. If I didn't save the crops now, we wouldn't survive the cold months ahead. "Marla," I said, my voice tight with urgency, "I need to save the field. Stay inside, protect our children." I didn't wait for her response. I knew she'd be terrified, but I had to act. The crops were our only life source. Without them, we'll starve. I ran outside, barely able to see through the smoke that was beginning to settle over the fields. I reached the wooden buckets by the well and filled them up with water. But as I turned towards the burning field, I saw a second catapult shot soaring through the air. It was coming straight for the house. I screamed, but there was no time to run. The stone hit the roof with an explosion, sending pieces of wood and stone flying in every direction. The house shook violently, and I was thrown off my feet by the shockwave. My ears were ringing as I struggled to stand. I saw the flames burning my home, the smoke rising from the wreckage, and I heard the screaming. Marla, Derek, Lila. I ran toward the house, but the stone had already torn through it. The roof caved in, the walls collapsed, and in the blink of an eye, the life I had worked so hard to build was nothing but a burning ruin. I collapsed to my knees, staring at the wreckage. I called their names, but no one answered. There was nothing left but the flames and the sound of the battle raging on. When the battle finally ended, there was nothing left. I crawled through the rubble, calling out their names, but it was no use. The house was a smoldering ruin, and my family was gone. I couldn't tell you how long I sat there, staring at the wreckage, not knowing if I wanted to scream or just give up entirely. The grief was suffocating, but underneath it was something else. Anger. Anger at the Imperials. Anger at the Stormcloaks. Anger at the gods who watched all of it happen. I had lost everything, and no one cared. The war, the soldiers, they just kept fighting. My family didn't matter. My home didn't matter. The only thing that mattered to them was who won and who lost. I no longer cared. The town was ruined, the fields burned, and there was nothing left for me. I wandered for days, lost in my grief and hatred, not sure where I was going. I had nothing left to lose. That's when I found them, a group of bandits led by Gorik, a former Legion general who deserted after losing his family from an Imperial raid meant to root out Thalmor spies. Betrayed and broken, Gorik abandoned his post, turning his back on the Empire and becoming a bandit. Many of his followers were former Legion soldiers who were loyal to him, while others were survivors from towns torn apart by war. People just like me. They didn't care about the war. They didn't care about anything except survival. And in a world where survival was all that mattered, I didn't need to ask questions. I didn't need to know what they did or why they did it. I joined them, no questions asked. They attacked supply carts, travelers, anyone with something they could take. And I was right there with them. There was no morality in the world anymore, no rules, just the cold reality that if you didn't take, you didn't survive. And I wasn't about to let anyone take anything more from me. Life was great, until that one accident. It was a quiet afternoon when we spotted him, a lone figure walking down the road, moving like he didn't have a care in the world. At first, we all thought the same thing. Perfect target. A lone traveler walking straight into our hands. "Look at him," Gorik, the boss, muttered, his voice filled with greed. "He's alone. This'll be easy." The bandits all grinned, already shifting into position. I was ready too. Who wouldn't be? We'd hit supply carts before, but this was a lone adventurer, an easy loot ripe for the taking. His armor looked expensive, and we could all use a little extra gold. Gorik slapped me on the back. "You ready?" "Yeah," I said, my hands shaking with excitement. We waited as the man got closer. It was going to be a quick, easy job. But then I took a better look at him. There was something off about him. Something I couldn't quite place at first. His armor wasn't like the leather or steel we were used to. It was dark, almost black, and it seemed to shimmer in a way that didn't make sense. A strange red glow. It looked otherworldly. Something forged by the Daedrix themselves, if I had to put words to it. A feeling of unease rushed onto my body. "Boss," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Something about him's wrong." Gorik rolled his eyes. "You're getting soft on me, boy. Don't let your nerves get the best of you." "Right," I said hesitantly, but I couldn't stop staring at the man. His movements were too calm, too sure. It didn't sit right. My instincts were screaming at me to back off, but Gorik was already signaling the rest of the group to move in. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the feeling. "Gorik, I don't think we should do this." "Are you kidding?" he snapped, eyes narrowing. "This is a perfect opportunity. You can't back out now." But even as Gorik said that, my eyes stayed locked on the adventurer. I had no reason to feel this way. He was just a man, right? But that armor, that presence, I couldn't ignore it. This wasn't just some traveler. This was something else. Without waiting for me to speak up again, Gorik gave the signal and we charged. Doran and Thrain, the faster ones, were the first to close the distance, brandishing their weapons with wide grins. I moved in with them, but my gut twisted tighter with every step. The adventurer was still walking, unaware, until we were just a few paces away. Then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. The man spun around so quickly it was almost unnatural. His mouth opened, and suddenly, a blast of raw power erupted from him, sending all of us flying backward like ragdolls. I was thrown through the air, my breath knocked out of me as I crashed into a tree, my vision spinning. I couldn't even hear for a moment, only the ringing in my ears. What in oblivion? As I tried to get my bearings, I saw it clearly for the first time. The power that came from him, that wasn't just magic. It was something else. Was that the Thu'um? The legendary shout of the Greybeards? The realization hit me like a hammer. I wasn't looking at some average adventurer. This man was the Dragonborn, the one who'd brought down Alduin, the World Eater. And here I was, about to die by his hand. I scrambled to my feet, my pulse racing. This wasn't a fight we could win. We couldn't even touch him. "Run!" I shouted, my voice hoarse, but my words were lost in the chaos. The others were already scrambling, some of them pulling their weapons, others simply backing away in fear. But Gorik, our fearless leader, wasn't having any of it. "He's just a man. We can take him." He raised his battle axe and charged, roaring like a bear. The Dragonborn didn't move at first, almost as if he was waiting for Gorik to make the first move. But then, another blast of power shot from his mouth, sending Gorik hurtling backward, crashing into the ground with a sickening thud. For a moment, it seemed like Gorik would stay down. But he wasn't done yet. He pushed himself up with a growl, wiping blood from his mouth. "You think you can defeat me that easily?" he snarled. "I've killed bigger men than you." The Dragonborn didn't respond. He stepped forward slowly, his eyes locked on Gorik. Then, in a blur of motion, he moved, drawing a massive sword from his back, and with one swing cleaved through Gorik's armor like it was paper. It was over in an instant. Gorik didn't even get a chance to swing. The rest of us were paralyzed. I didn't know if it was fear, the shock of seeing Gorik fall so quickly, or the sheer force of the Dragonborn's power. The others didn't even last a minute. Thrain tried to charge, but with a swipe of the Dragonborn's sword, he was knocked to the ground, his chest split open. Doran went for a sneak attack, but a shout from the Dragonborn sent him flying through the air, landing in a crumpled heap. Before Doran could get back up, the Dragonborn raised a hand and sent a burst of lightning that burned through Doran's chest. Others tried to flee, but the Dragonborn summoned his familiar, a tall frost Atronach, sending it to hunt down the ones who ran. Those who dared to fight back faced his blade as he cut them down one by one. I was next. I tried to run, but the Dragonborn's eyes locked onto mine, and I froze. That gaze was all-consuming, like he was looking into my very soul. I could feel the weight of his power, his presence, as if he was daring me to try and run. And then, as if time slowed, he took a step toward me. I was barely able to move before he raised his sword, the tip of it glowing faintly, as if it was charged with some otherworldly energy. The air around me crackled. I thought this was it. I had no way to fight him, no way to survive. But then, just as the sword came down, a deafening roar split the sky. I turned just in time to see a dragon swooping down from the clouds, its massive wings blocking out the fading sunlight. The ground shook with each beat as it circled, its scaled body casting a shadow over the clearing. The Dragonborn stood firm, raising his weapon, unfazed by the towering beast above him. They locked eyes for just a moment, and then the dragon dove, unleashing a torrent of fire that made the very air sizzle. The Dragonborn countered with another shout. This time, a shout filled with so much hatred that it seemed to bound the dragon's ability to fly as it came crashing down. I didn't stay to see the outcome. I turned and run away as fast as I could. Trees and rocks blurred past me as I stumbled through the forest, my ears ringing from the dragon's roar and the shouts of the Dragonborn's power. I'd only made it a few minutes before I heard another roar, a dragon scream that seemed to shake the sky. I turned to look back through the gaps in the trees. I saw it. The Dragonborn stood over the dragon's fallen body, and as I watched, something incredible, something terrifying happened. A glowing light, almost like fire but pulsing with life, began to rise from the dragon's body. It swirled toward him, like its very soul being pulled from its corpse, drawn right into the Dragonborn. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The power, the finality of it. This was more than I'd ever bargained for. I turned away from the sight, shaking. I kept running. I found a cave and took shelter, hoping to fade away from the horror. It's been a few days now. At first, I was terrified he'd come after me, but there's been no signs of him. I decided to leave my hiding spot after thinking over my life's choices. Perhaps this was a message from the divines, a chance to start over. I decided to settle down in Riften. I heard it was a haven for people with a past like mine, but this life of blood and steel was behind me. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. Maybe I'd find some work, live a quieter life in the shadows of the city. Anything was better than crossing paths with the Dragonborn again. And who knows? Maybe I'd work up the nerve to ask that Argonian out for a drink, especially after catching her with that curious book.